The first thing I noticed wasn't the laughter. It was the silence right before it. That brief, almost sacred pause, the kind that only happens when someone is about to say something they shouldn't. Something sharp. Something that doesn't just land, it cuts. I was standing near the edge of the banquet hall, fingers wrapped loosely around a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched in 10 minutes, watching my father shake hands with men who had never known him outside a pressed suit and polished shoes. Retirement looked good on him, or at least that's what everyone kept saying. 40 years, someone near me said. That's a lifetime of discipline. I almost smiled at that, because discipline wasn't something you retired from. It stayed in your bones. It followed you into silence. It woke up with you at 3:47 a.m. for no reason other than the fact that somewhere deep in your body, something still believed it needed to be ready, always ready. But that wasn't the kind of discipline they were talking about. They meant early mornings, boardrooms, deadlines, safe things, understandable things. My father had built a life that made sense to people, predictable, respected, clean. And tonight, they were celebrating that. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, soft golden lighting that made everyone look just a little more important than they really were. I didn't belong in that lighting. Not really. And I think, deep down, they all knew it. I felt it in the way conversations shifted when I stepped closer, in the polite smiles that never quite reached the eyes, in the questions that always sounded the same. So, what are you doing these days? Not, what did you survive? Not, how are you holding up? Just, what are you doing? As if life could be measured in job titles and paychecks. As if survival didn't count. As if coming back wasn't already everything. I adjusted the sleeve of my blazer, dark, simple, fitted just enough to pass in a room like this, and took a slow breath. I had learned how to stand in places where I didn't belong. You learn that quickly when you've spent years in environments where belonging isn't the goal. Surviving is. Adapting is. Disappearing when you need to. Showing up when it matters. That's the real skill. Not blending in, but choosing when not to. Hey, I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Ethan, my younger brother. Though younger had stopped meaning anything a long time ago. He moved like someone who never questioned his place in a room, confident, relaxed, loud in the way people are when they've never had to earn silence. "You've been hiding all night," he said, stepping beside me, adjusting the cuff of his tailored jacket like it was second nature. "You could at least pretend to enjoy this." "I am enjoying it," I said calmly. He smirked, that familiar, almost effortless expression that always carried just enough edge to make it clear this wasn't a conversation. It was positioning. "Yeah? Because it kind of looks like you're counting the minutes until you can leave." I glanced at him then. Same sharp jawline as our father, same easy confidence, but none of the weight, none of the understanding that confidence usually came from surviving something. His came from never having to. "I'm fine, Ethan." He nodded slowly, then took a sip of his drink. And for a moment, I thought that was the end of it, that maybe, just maybe, tonight would pass without incident, without that moment, the one I could feel building somewhere in the background like distant thunder. But then he laughed, soft at first, then louder, and just enough people turned their heads. That's when I knew. Here it comes. "You know," he said, his voice rising just slightly, "it's actually kind of impressive." I didn't respond. I'd learned that silence often says more than anything else. It takes real commitment to go through everything you did and still end up with nothing to show for it. There it was, not loud enough to be called a scene, but not quiet enough to be private, perfectly placed, surgical. A few people nearby shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in, curious, always curious. I felt my grip tighten slightly around the glass, not out of anger, out of instinct, because somewhere deep inside, something old and trained had just woken up, alert, aware, measuring. "You spent years in the army," he went on, tilting his head slightly. "Missed birthdays, holidays, everything." A pause. Then the line, delivered with the casual shrug. "And for what?" Another small laugh. "Honestly, it kind of feels like you just wasted your life." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed exactly where they were meant to. And for a second, no one spoke. Because even in rooms like this, people know when something real has just been said. I looked at him, really looked at him. And what struck me wasn't the arrogance. It was the certainty. He believed it. Every word. Not because he was cruel, but because he had never seen a world where those words weren't true. That's the thing about people like Ethan. They don't understand sacrifice that doesn't come with visible reward. If they can't see it, it didn't happen. If they can't measure it, it doesn't matter. I could have said a lot of things in that moment. I could have told him about the nights that never ended, about the heat, the dust, the silence that felt heavier than noise. I could have told him about the convoy that didn't make it back, about the names I still remembered, the ones no one here would ever know. I could have told him about the moment you realize that coming home doesn't mean you left anything behind. But I didn't, because none of that would make sense to him here, not like this. So instead, I did the simplest thing. I nodded, slowly, calmly, and I said, "You're right." The reaction was immediate. Confusion, surprise, a flicker of something uncertain in his eyes, because that's not what he expected. People like Ethan expect resistance, argument, emotion. They expect you to fight for your worth, because that's the game they understand. But I wasn't playing his game. Not anymore. I set my glass down on the table beside me, carefully, deliberately. Then I looked at him lastly, not with anger, not with hurt, just clarity, and I turned and walked away. No one stopped me. Not my mother, not my father, not even Ethan, because in that moment, they all thought the same thing, that I was walking away because I had nothing left to say. They were wrong. I was walking away because I was done explaining myself to people who had never earned the truth. The air outside was colder than I expected, sharp, clean, real. I stepped out into the quiet of the parking lot, the distant hum of traffic barely reaching this part of the city. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing, letting the noise of the room fade from my system. This part never got easier. Not the insults, not the judgment, but the shift, the transition from holding everything in to letting yourself feel it, even just a little. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys. Simple, unremarkable, just like everything else about me, at least on the surface. That was the point. I walked toward my car, parked a little farther out than the others, not because I had to, because I preferred it that way. Distance has a way of giving you perspective. The car unlocked with a soft click. I opened the door, paused, and for just a second, I let myself think about going back, about walking into that room, saying something, anything, proving them wrong. But then I remembered something I learned a long time ago. The people who need you to prove your worth are the same people who will never accept it. So I got in, closed the door, and drove away. That night, they went back to their conversations, their laughter, their certainty. They told themselves a story, that I couldn't handle it, that I ran, that Ethan was right. It made things easier, cleaner. People like clean endings. They don't like loose threads, unanswered questions. But life doesn't care about what people like, and neither do I. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that while they were celebrating a life that made sense, I had been building one that didn't need their understanding. And the truth, the real truth, wasn't something you explained at a dinner table. It was something that revealed itself, slowly, inevitably, all at once. And when it did, it wouldn't just change how they saw me, it would change everything they thought they knew. They said I ran. That's what my mother told my aunt 2 days later on the phone. I don't know what happened, she sighed, loud enough for the sympathy to settle in. She just left, like always. Like always. That part almost made me laugh, because the truth was, I had spent most of my life staying. Staying when things got uncomfortable, staying when I wasn't understood, staying when leaving would have been easier. But people don't remember the times you stay. They remember the one time you don't. And then they build a story around it, one that makes them feel better, one that makes you smaller. I didn't correct them. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't explain. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't interested in being understood. 3 days after the dinner, I was back in a place that actually made sense to me. Not a banquet hall, not a polished room filled with people measuring success in quiet comparisons, but a converted operations building just outside the city. From the outside, it looked like nothing. Faded concrete, minimal signage, a structure most people would drive past without a second glance. That was intentional. Inside, it was something else entirely. Rows of workstations, large digital displays, secure lines, real-time data streams moving faster than most people could process. Controlled chaos, focused, purposeful, alive. This was where I worked. Not officially, not in any way that would make sense on a LinkedIn profile or a dinner conversation, but this was where I belonged. "Morning, Captain." The voice came from my left. I didn't turn right away. Old habits. Always check your surroundings before you respond. Then I glanced over. Maya stood there, tablet in hand, her dark hair pulled back into a tight bun, eyes already scanning through updates. She didn't smile. None of us did much of that here. Not because we couldn't, because we didn't need to. Respect didn't come from politeness. It came from trust. "Morning," I replied, setting my bag down near my station. "You're early," she said. I couldn't sleep. She nodded like she understood, because she did. No follow-up questions, no forced concern, just acknowledgement. That's the thing about people who've seen real things. They don't ask questions just to feel silence. I powered up my terminal, the screen flickering to life with secured access prompts. Within seconds, the system recognized me. Access granted. Layers of information opened up. Live feeds, mission logs, ongoing operations, things most people would never even know existed, and that was exactly how it needed to be. "Update," I asked, scanning through the data. Maya stepped closer, her voice low, efficient. 2 developments overnight, 1 domestic, 1 overseas. Domestic is priority. I leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing as I pulled up the relevant file. Go. Veteran Housing Network in Arizona, one of our partnered facilities, flagged unusual activity, security breach attempt at 0214. That got my attention, not because breaches were common, but because of what that facility represented. It wasn't just housing, it was one of the first systems we built, a network designed specifically for veterans who had nowhere else to go. Men and women who came back and found nothing waiting for them. No structure, no support, no place to land. So we built one. Quietly, carefully, without announcements or press releases. Because this wasn't charity, this was infrastructure. "Contained?" I asked. Maya nodded. Attempt blocked, but whoever it was knew exactly where to hit. This wasn't random. I exhaled slowly. That meant someone was paying attention, and not in a good way. "Flag it," I said. "Full review. I want to know how they got that close." "Already in motion." Of course it was. That's why Maya was here. No wasted time, no missed details. Most people think the hardest part of building something is starting. They're wrong. Starting is easy. It's the part where you're fueled by purpose, adrenaline, the belief that what you're doing matters. The hardest part is protecting it, making sure it survives, making sure the people who depend on it don't get caught in something they never signed up for. I stood up, walking toward the main display at the center of the room. A map filled the screen, points of light scattered across it. each one representing something we had built: facilities, networks, operations, lives. This wasn't just a job, it was a system, one that connected people who had been forgotten and gave them something they hadn't had in a long time: stability. Overseas? I asked. Maya tapped her tablet, switching the display. A new set of data appeared. Medical extraction request, Eastern region, complicated terrain, limited access. Local resources can't reach them. I studied the coordinates. Familiar. Too familiar. Places like that, they don't forgive mistakes. How many? I asked. 4. Too critical. I nodded once. No hesitation. Prep a team. Maya hesitated for a half-second, just enough for me to notice. Say it, I said. We're stretched thin, she replied. If we deploy now, it puts pressure on the domestic side. I looked back at the map, at the network, at everything we had built, and everything that could go wrong if we made the wrong call. This was the part no one saw, the decisions that didn't have clean answers, the weight of choosing where to be, who to help, who to trust that they could hold on just a little longer. They won't make it if we wait, I said quietly. Maya didn't argue. She didn't need to. She already knew. All right, she said. I'll get the team moving. As she walked away, I stayed there for a moment longer, looking at the screen, at the lives represented by those small glowing points. This was what Ethan couldn't see, what my family couldn't understand, because it didn't come with titles or recognition or anything you could explain over dinner. It wasn't clean, it wasn't simple, and it definitely wasn't something you could measure with a paycheck. But it mattered, more than anything I could have said that night. Later, that afternoon, I stepped outside for the first time since I'd arrived. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the empty lot. I leaned against the hood of my car, letting the quiet settle in. This was the only part I missed, not the people, not the conversations, just the idea of something normal, something predictable. But even that felt distant now, like a life I had observed once, but never really lived. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again and again. Persistent. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Ethan, of course. I stared at the name for a second. Not angry, not even surprised, just curious. I let it ring once more before answering. Yeah. A pause. Then his voice. Different this time. Less confident. Hey, where have you been? I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. Busy, I said. Yeah, well, Mom's been asking. I didn't respond, because we both knew that wasn't the real reason he was calling. Another pause. Then, look, about the other night. You don't need to explain, I cut in calmly. Silence. That threw him off, again. Because people like Ethan expect conflict. They don't know what to do with calm. No, I said you don't need to explain. My voice wasn't cold, it wasn't harsh, just final. Another pause, longer this time. Then, quieter. You really think you wasted your life? That question, that was the first real thing he had said. I looked out at the horizon, at the fading light, and for a moment, I thought about answering honestly, about telling him everything. But then I remembered something important. Truth isn't something you give to people who haven't learned how to see it. So instead, I said, no, and ended the call. That night, the team deployed, efficient, silent, precise, just like always. I watched the operation unfold from the control room, every movement tracked, every decision calculated, no room for error, not where they were, not with what was at stake. This was the part no one saw. The first time they saw it, they didn't understand what hit them. It wasn't a car. It wasn't money. It wasn't some flashy display meant to humiliate or brag. It was everything. It started with a knock on the door. My mother, pacing in her polished heels, hair perfectly coiffed, voice carrying that tone she thought commanded authority. "Eleanor, open the door. I need to talk to you." I didn't answer at first. She thought she could intimidate me. She thought she could step into my world and demand compliance. She was wrong. I didn't open the door immediately. I let her shout, her words bouncing off the walls like fragile porcelain. "Your sister called me. Ethan said you're hiding something." "Something," I finally said, stepping into the hallway. Calm, controlled. They always underestimated that. "Yes, something. You're embarrassing the family, Eleanor. Everyone's talking." I smirked slightly, because the truth was nothing she had ever imagined. I led her to the garage. Not the car I drove to get there. That was insignificant. A beat-up old vehicle that had been my own private joke for years. No, I led her to the garage. It was massive. A structure she didn't even know existed. One I had kept secret for years. The sliding door lifted, and the world she thought she knew shattered. Inside, it wasn't just vehicles or tools or dusty storage boxes. It was a universe. Shimmering lights, organized chaos, rows of high-end cars, each meticulously restored, exotic machines gleaming under perfectly calibrated lighting, vintage racing cars, luxury imports, even a matte black muscle car that seemed to growl at anyone who approached. But that wasn't the centerpiece. The centerpiece was the room at the far end. Glass walls. Inside, racks of electronics, screens flickering with live streams, secure networks, maps of every major city, files marked with operation codes, timelines, and people. People whose lives I had touched, people whose paths I had crossed silently, carefully, people who had no idea I was the one pulling the strings to keep them safe, alive, or simply seen. She gasped, not loud enough to fill the garage, but enough to let me know. Her eyes darted from the machines to the displays to the meticulously organized chaos that no outsider would ever imagine could exist behind the walls of my cheap car life. "Eleanor," she whispered. I didn't need her to finish. She couldn't. No words existed to describe what she was seeing. "Do you own all of this?" she finally managed, voice cracking. I didn't answer immediately. I let her take it in. Every detail, every corner, every flicker of light on the screens, every polished surface reflecting what she thought she knew about me, and proving it wrong. "Yes," I said finally. "I built it." Her knees almost buckled. Almost. Because she still didn't get it. You built this?" "Yes," I replied. Calm, direct. "Not for show, not for you, not for anyone in this house who mocked me for a car that didn't matter. I built this for people who matter, people who couldn't find a place anywhere else." She blinked. 1, 2, 3 times. Her perfectly applied makeup seemed to falter under the reality. Her voice trembled. Why didn't you tell us?" I didn't smile. "Because you would have never understood. You measure success with appearances. You measure people by the car they drive, the house they live in, the name on their resume. You don't see what people do, only what they show you. And that's fine. That's your choice. But it's not my life." Then she noticed it. A wall of plaques, photographs, letters, videos, screens showing live feeds of ongoing operations. Her eyes went wide. She recognized some of the people in the photos. Veterans, families, children, survivors of events she'd only read about in the paper. "Is this real?" she stammered. "Yes, every bit of it. Real lives, real people, and every single one of them I helped in ways you couldn't even imagine. People who had nowhere to turn, who were ignored, overlooked. They mattered to me, and I made sure they had a place." Tears welled up in her eyes. Not shame, not embarrassment. Something else. Something unfamiliar. Recognition. She realized she had underestimated her entire life. And then it hit her. the enormity. Not just the material wealth, the vehicles, the equipment, but the impact, the reach, the thoughtfulness, the discipline, the precision. Everything she had laughed at, mocked, dismissed. It was the surface of a life she had never understood. I had created a world she couldn't touch, a world of purpose, of action, of change, and she had no idea how small her world looked now. I don't understand, she whispered. You don't have to, I said softly, calm, not angry, not triumphant, calm. That's the point. Understanding isn't necessary, not for this, not for anyone here. They don't need you to understand them. They just need someone who cares enough to act. That's the difference between what I do and what you do. Her phone rang suddenly. Ethan. She fumbled, almost dropping it. Mom, he said hurriedly. What's going on? Are you okay? I ignored him. Let her handle that one herself. Let her talk, let her struggle with the reality she had never accounted for. That night, the three of us sat in silence. Not because words weren't possible, because none existed that could bridge the gap. I finally understood what I had been building all these years. Not the cars, not the screens, not the networks. I had been building a life that mattered, a life that respected itself. And finally, my family saw it. The following day, I invited Ethan to come by. He arrived, skeptical, hesitant, confused. He walked in, saw the garage, the operations, the cars, the systems, the lives connected. He froze. Not because he was intimidated, not because he was jealous, because he hadn't seen me. Not really. Not like this. He'd only seen the girl who drove a cheap car, the girl who didn't fit their expectations, the girl they thought they could lecture and belittle. Now he saw me, really saw me, and he didn't know what to say. So he said nothing. I walked him through it. Not every detail, not everything, that would have been overwhelming, but enough. Enough for him to grasp the scale, the thought, the effort, the love, the care. Do you do this for real people? He asked finally. Yes, I said. Always. And no one outside this room has any idea. He sank into a chair slowly, his head in his hands. You're incredible, he whispered. I had no idea. And in that moment, I realized something. The most powerful thing I had built wasn't the garage. It wasn't the screens. It wasn't the networks. I had been building proof. Proof that people could defy expectations. Proof that life could be more than appearances. Proof that the girl they laughed at was unstoppable. Over the next week, the shock waves rippled. Mom couldn't stop talking about it. Eleanor, I don't know what to say. You could see it in her eyes, humility, something rare, something I had never seen in her before. Ethan became quiet, thoughtful. No teasing, no mockery, just reflection. Even my sister, she didn't speak much first, but I could see it. The doubt, the questioning, the slow recognition that she had been wrong. And yet, some things hadn't changed. Not entirely. There were whispers, comments, thinly veiled jabs masked as concern. You don't have to keep proving anything, you know, my mother said one night, almost apologetically. I looked at her, calm, smiling faintly. Proving isn't the point, I said. I'm not here for approval. I'm here to act, to help, to build. And if you can't see the value in that, that's fine. Just don't try to stop it. She nodded, not fully understanding, but understanding enough to know she couldn't control it. By the end of the week, the family dynamic had shifted. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't seamless, but the scale had changed. I had reclaimed my narrative. I had shown them that life was not measured in cheap cars, Instagram photos, or social approval. It was measured in action, in impact, in unseen effort. And in that unseen world, I was powerful. The final shock came when I revealed one last detail, not to my mother, not to Ethan, not even to my sister at first, to Maya and the team. A hidden network, one that even they didn't fully grasp until I explained it. A plan I had been building for years, a secret that would change lives in ways no one outside our walls could imagine. The scale was almost laughable in its ambition, and yet completely necessary. This, I said, pointing to the screen. The morning sunlight crept through the blinds, slicing golden lines across the polished concrete floor of my garage. I stood in the center, arms crossed, surveying the space that had become both sanctuary and statement. Every car, every screen, every meticulously organized box told a story my family had never paused to notice, a story they had assumed didn't exist. Today, however, the assumptions would crumble completely. My sister was first to arrive, still in disbelief. She hesitated at the edge of the garage, fingers gripping the strap of her designer bag as though holding on to the remnants of her old judgment. Her eyes darted from one gleaming car to another, lingering on the screens that displayed maps, people's names, and the silent ripple of operations in progress. You didn't tell anyone," she murmured, voice trembling with a mixture of awe and shame. I stepped closer, maintaining calm. I didn't need anyone to validate it. You see a cheap car and think that's all there is. That's your choice, but the world is much larger than your expectations. Her lips quivered. I can't believe this. I thought you were just living in some sad little dream, driving that rust bucket. She pointed vaguely at the old car parked outside, still thinking in her old terms. Dreams? I asked, a small, controlled smile playing on my lips. No, plans, actions, impact. There's a difference. She swallowed hard, finally realizing she had been living in a bubble of arrogance, a bubble I had quietly watched and let her maintain, until now. Ethan arrived next, stepping cautiously into the garage. Unlike my sister, he didn't try to mask his awe. His mouth hung slightly open, eyes darted to every corner as though he couldn't process the immensity of what he was seeing. You've been doing all this?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "All these people, all these lives?" "Yes," I said simply, and I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it mattered. I did it because someone had to. He nodded slowly, sinking into one of the chairs near the back. I had no idea. That's the point. You don't have to know. You just have to see that it's possible. The air was heavy with realization. My family, for the first time, was confronted not just with my secret life, but with the magnitude of it, the weight of it, the dedication that had been invisible to them for years. And I could see the shift in their eyes, the dawning understanding that the girl they had mocked for driving a cheap car was not only capable, but extraordinary. I guided them to the centerpiece of the garage, the glass-enclosed operations room. Inside, screens displayed live feeds, maps, and encrypted communication channels. Volunteers, beneficiaries, and collaborators moved across the screens in a synchronized flow that was mesmerizing and humbling. "This is real," my sister whispered. "All of this? You've been managing this entire network?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Every single person you see here has a story. Every mission, every connection, every intervention, it's real. And it's happening because someone chose to act rather than judge." Her hands trembled as she reached for one of the glass walls. I don't even know what to say." "Then don't," I said softly. "Just watch, listen, learn, and maybe finally understand." I took them through the stories of a few key individuals: a single mother struggling to provide for her children, a veteran isolated and forgotten after years of service, a teenager at risk of falling into a life of crime. Each story was a testament to resilience, courage, and the quiet power of intervention. With every story, the expressions on my family's faces shifted, from disbelief to admiration, from judgment to humility, from arrogance to understanding. Hours passed as we moved through the garage, the operations room, and the countless files that documented my life's work. My sister finally spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I never saw any of this. I thought I knew you. You thought wrong, I said gently, and that's okay. But now you see, and now you can choose to do better, or at least to stop underestimating others. Ethan nodded in agreement, eyes still wide. You've changed everything for so many people, and we had no idea. Then came the moment of reckoning. My mother, who had always been the most vocal critic, stepped forward, her posture stiff but her eyes softened. Eleanor, all of this, it's incredible. I I was wrong. I judged you by appearances, and I didn't see the person you truly are. I studied her carefully. There was no triumph in my expression, no vindication, just calm, quiet acknowledgement. It's not about proving anything to you. It's about doing what's right, even when no one is watching. Tears welled up in her eyes. For the first time, I saw vulnerability, humility, and genuine pride, not in her own achievements, but in mine. The breakthrough came when I revealed the final part of the network, the hidden project I had been developing in secret. It was a massive initiative designed to provide sustainable resources and support for communities in crisis. It was something my family could never have imagined, even if they had been looking for it. This, I said, gesturing to the plan mapped across multiple screens, is the culmination of everything I've been working toward. It's not flashy, it's not for show, but it will change lives permanently. My sister gasps, You've built an entire system on your own? Yes, I confirmed, with help from people who care just as I do, and it's only the beginning. For the next few days, my family struggled to come to terms with the reality of what they had seen. Old arguments faded into silence, replaced by a newfound respect that none of us had anticipated. The cheap car, once a symbol of my supposed inadequacy, had become irrelevant. The focus had shifted entirely to action, impact, and purpose. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the garage floor, my sister approached me quietly. "Eleanor, I don't deserve to be here," she whispered. I mocked you, underestimated you. I thought I was better than you, and I wasn't. I see that now." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's not about deserving, it's about understanding, and you're beginning to understand." Ethan joined me, nodding in agreement. "We were blind, but we see now, and I'm proud of you." The true transformation, however, came when I realized that my family's recognition, while meaningful, was secondary. The real victory was the ripple effect of my work, the lives that had been touched, the communities strengthened, the hope restored. That was the measure of my success, not their approval. And yet, seeing my family finally grasp a fraction of that reality was deeply satisfying. Weeks passed. The garage became a place of collaboration rather than confrontation. My sister and Ethan began to assist in small ways, learning the intricacies of operations and the value of quiet action. My mother, once a symbol of judgment, now became a source of encouragement, offering support in ways that had been unimaginable before. The network grew, not just in scale, but in purpose. Every new project, every new life touched, reaffirmed the choices I had made and the path I had forged. And then came the moment that would define everything. A crisis emerged in a neighboring city, a community devastated by a natural disaster. Communications were down, resources were scarce, and hope was fleeting. Without hesitation, I mobilized the network. Volunteers, supplies, and coordinated efforts streamed into the affected area. My family watched as I orchestrated the response with precision and care. They saw firsthand the impact of dedication, strategy, and unwavering commitment. By the time the operation concluded, hundreds of lives had been saved, families reunited, and communities stabilized. The gratitude of those affected was palpable, echoing in the quiet moments as we returned to the garage. My sister, now visibly moved, turned to me. "Eleanor, I can't believe it. You saved so many people, and we didn't even notice." You don't need to notice. You just need to remember that impact isn't always visible, and it's never measured by appearances or possessions. Ethan nodded in agreement. "You've changed everything for so many people, and we had no idea." My mother simply embraced me, tears flowing freely. "I'm proud of you, Eleanor, more than I ever knew I could be." As the days turned into weeks, the dynamics in our household shifted permanently. The cheap car, the judgments, the misunderstandings, they all faded into irrelevance. What mattered now was action, integrity, and the quiet, unstoppable force of someone who refused to be defined by superficial measures. The garage, once a secret sanctuary, had become a symbol, not of wealth, not of status, but of dedication, resilience, and the unseen power of meaningful work. And as I stood among the machines, screens, and plans that had become extensions of my will, I realized something profound. The world could underestimate me all it wanted. My family could doubt me, mock me, or fail to understand. But the work, the impact, was undeniable. And that was enough. The day began with an unusual sense of anticipation. Sunlight spilled across the driveway, cutting through the early morning mist, and the garage doors glinted like polished armor. But this morning was different. There was a quiet electricity in the air, a tension born not from conflict, but from revelation. Today, the world, and more importantly, my family, would truly see what had been hidden behind the cheap car, the quiet demeanor, and the invisible labor of years. I walked through the garage slowly, letting my fingers brush over the cool metal of the cars, feeling the hum of energy from the screens and networks that filled the space. Each device, each screen, each project plan represented someone whose life had been altered because I refused to settle for mediocrity. And now it was time for the ultimate test, letting everyone see the full scale of it. My sister, still grappling with the awe from Phase 4, had invited a few of our extended family members over under the pretense of a casual brunch. She had no idea what they were about to witness. My mother, cautious but supportive, offered to help with preparations, while Ethan hovered, torn between curiosity and nervousness about the impending revelation. By mid-morning, the guests began to arrive. Casual conversation filled the air, light and superficial at first. I could feel the old judgments and assumptions lingering in their eyes, unspoken but palpable. They looked at me, glanced at the modest exterior of the driveway, and whispered about the cheap car, but their ignorance was about to collide head first with reality. I motioned for everyone to follow me into the garage. The doors rolled up with a smooth hum, revealing the full expanse of the space. The gleaming vehicles were only the beginning. The true heart of the operation lay beyond, in the glass-enclosed room pulsing with activity. Their initial reactions were predictable, gasps, wide eyes, and a few murmurs of disbelief. But as I guided them closer, showing them the live feeds, the maps, and the meticulous coordination of resources, disbelief turned to fascination. Each screen told a story: a family rescued, a veteran supported, a young student given opportunity. "This," I began, my voice steady but carrying a weight that silenced the room, "isn't about money or status. It's about making a difference. Every life here has been touched by action, not by words, and that's something that can't be bought, borrowed, or faked." My sister stepped forward, still trembling, clearly struggling to reconcile her old assumptions with the truth in front of her. I don't even know what to say. All these people, all this work, I had no idea you were doing any of this. I smiled faintly, a mixture of sadness and quiet triumph. You didn't see it because you weren't looking. That cheap car you mocked, it was never the story. It was a symbol of what you refused to understand. And now, perhaps, you do. Her eyes filled with tears, reflecting both shame and awe. I can't believe I judged you for something so trivial. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I nodded. Apologies are words. Action is proof. And that is why we are here today, to show that real impact cannot be measured by appearances. As we moved deeper into the operations room, the full magnitude of my work became apparent. Volunteers communicated in real time across multiple continents, coordinating emergency responses, educational initiatives, and community support programs. Every movement was precise, every decision deliberate. The room hummed with energy, a symphony of purpose. Ethan, who had always been pragmatic but skeptical, finally spoke. This is incredible. The scale, the coordination, it's like a small city of support. How did you manage all of this on your own? I shrugged lightly, though my eyes betrayed the countless hours of dedication and sacrifice. I didn't do it alone. I had help, but I never sought recognition. The work was enough, and sometimes the best work happens in silence. Then came the moment of public revelation. My sister, inspired, or perhaps compelled by what she had seen, invited a few of our extended family members over under the pretense of a casual brunch. She had no idea what they were about to witness. By mid-morning, cameras were rolling, microphones were set, and the journalists and community members who had once dismissed me were standing in the garage, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. I addressed them calmly, letting the room absorb the gravity of the moment. For years, I've been underestimated, I've been mocked, I've been judged based on appearances and possessions, but the world is bigger than a car, bigger than superficial judgments, and today you will see the truth of what dedicated action can achieve. I led them through the network, highlighting individual stories of impact. There was Rosa, a young single mother who had found stable employment in housing because of a program I had initiated. There was Captain Jameson, a veteran who had been isolated for years, now thriving in a community of support and purpose. There were dozens of others, each a living testament to quiet, unseen work. By the time we reached the final segment, a project that coordinated disaster relief in regions recently affected by floods, the journalists were visibly shaken. The volunteers on screens were mobilizing in real time, sending supplies, coordinating rescue efforts, and communicating with local authorities. The scale and immediacy of it was undeniable. One of the reporters, visibly choked up, whispered to a colleague, I never imagined. I smiled faintly, knowing that words alone could never convey the impact. It was visible, undeniable, living proof. Back in the garage, my family's transformation was complete. My sister, who had once mocked me relentlessly, now stood with tears streaming down her face. Ethan, usually reserved and logical, could only nod, overwhelmed by the scale and humanity of it all. My mother, proud and humbled, finally embraced me, whispering, "I'm so proud of you, more than I can say." It was a moment of reconciliation, not just with my family, but with the years of isolation, judgment, and misunderstanding I had endured. For the first time, they saw me, not as a girl with a cheap car, but a woman whose dedication and quiet strength had touched hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. The climax came unexpectedly. A local community leader, present to witness the revelation, approached me with a formal invitation to collaborate on a national initiative to expand support networks across multiple states. The proposal was ambitious, unprecedented in scope, and required a level of coordination I had only dreamed of achieving. "This is incredible," he said, shaking my hand with sincerity. "Your work here, it's nothing short of revolutionary. We need you leading this effort." I paused, considering the weight of responsibility, the potential for further impact, and the journey that had led me here. "I'll do it," I said finally, "but only if we continue to prioritize people over recognition, action over applause, and integrity over ego. That is the only way this work will truly succeed." The room erupted in applause, not for me personally, but for the vision, the dedication, and the lives that would be changed as a result. That evening, after the cameras had left and the garage had returned to its quiet hum, I sat alone for a moment, reflecting. The cheap car sat outside, now irrelevant, a relic of old judgments. The people, the work, the lives transformed, that was the measure of everything. My family gathered around me, not to praise, but to understand, to support, and to learn. My sister finally spoke, voice soft and sincere. "Eleanor, I don't know if I can ever make up for the way I treated you, but I want to help. I want to be part of this. I want to learn from you." I smiled, finally allowing a sense of relief to wash over me. Then start by seeing the world differently, by acting differently. That's all that matters. The days that followed were filled with planning, coordination, and quiet victories. Every mission, every rescue, every opportunity to help another person reaffirmed the choices I had made. My family became partners, not by obligation, but by understanding the depth and importance of the work. The cheap car, once a symbol of ridicule, became a story we shared, not with shame, but with irony, a reminder that appearances deceive, judgments mislead, and the quiet, persistent pursuit of purpose is what truly defines a person. As I looked around the garage one last time before heading out to a community meeting, I felt a profound sense of peace. The cheap car, the judgments, the old conflicts, they all faded into irrelevance. What remained was clarity, purpose, and the undeniable power of quiet strength. The world could underestimate me all it wanted, but now they had witnessed the truth, and that truth was unstoppable. The sun was just rising over the horizon, spilling golden light across the quiet streets and glinting off the modest driveway where it all began. I stood outside, taking a slow, deep breath, feeling the weight of the last several months settle into a calm resolve. Everything had led to this moment: the revelation in the garage, the reconciliations, the community initiatives, and now it was time for the final chapter. Today, the entire neighborhood, friends, and family were invited to witness the inauguration of the first of several community centers inspired by my work. These centers weren't just buildings, they were sanctuaries for those in need, veterans struggling to reintegrate, young families fighting to survive, and children dreaming of a future that society had tried to deny them. My sister, standing beside me, looked radiant in a way that had nothing to do with appearances. The sharpness of her past criticisms was gone, replaced by a warmth that came from genuine understanding and empathy. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered, glancing at the center. I was so wrong before. You were so right all along." I placed a hand on her shoulder, the familiar warmth grounding me. "It's not about being right, it's about doing something meaningful. You see it now. That's what matters." Ethan, equally transformed, checked the schedule on his tablet and nodded toward me. "Everything's set. Volunteers, welcome packets, programs, they're ready. The community has been waiting." The morning air was filled with anticipation, the kind that vibrates in your chest before something monumental occurs. I looked around and realized that the people arriving were no longer strangers. They were stories I had touched, lives I had changed, ripples that had become waves. The ribbon-cutting ceremony began, with local officials, media personnel, and community leaders present. The cameras flashed, but I barely noticed. This wasn't about recognition, not anymore. My focus was on the people, the children laughing as they ran toward the new playground, the veterans nodding respectfully at one another, the families whose lives had been transformed through quiet support. As the ribbon fell, the first of the volunteers stepped forward, welcoming families into the center. The crowd erupted in applause, a sound that was both joyous and humbling. I felt my sister squeeze my hand, and in that moment, I knew the transformation had come full circle. Later, as the initial excitement settled, I found myself walking through the hallways of the center, observing the murals depicting stories of resilience and hope. Each painting, each plaque, told a story of struggle, persistence, and eventual triumph. It was a reminder that the work we do, though often invisible, carries immense power. A young girl approached me, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you the person who helped bring all of this here?" she asked timidly. I smiled softly, kneeling to meet her gaze. I helped, yes, but it's everyone together. People like you, your friends, your family, who make it real. I just started it. You'll continue it. Her face lit up with a mix of awe and excitement. I want to help too. You already are, I said gently. Just by being here, learning and believing that you can make a difference, you're already part of it. Meanwhile, my sister had gathered a few volunteers to work on organizing supplies. Watching her, I saw a transformation that mirrored the change in the neighborhood. The mocking, judgmental voice of the past had completely vanished. In its place stood a woman willing to learn, contribute, and share the vision. My mother arrived shortly after, carrying a tray of refreshments and offering smiles to everyone. She paused near me, her eyes misty but proud. I always knew you had something special, she whispered. I just never understood the full scale until now. You don't have to understand it completely, I said, taking her hand. You just have to be willing to see it, support it, and carry it forward. The afternoon brought a surprise. Several local families whose children had benefited from previous initiatives arrived, each wanting to express their gratitude. One man, a veteran named Thomas, stepped forward with tears in his eyes. I lost everything, my home, my wife, my pride, but your support gave me a second chance. I can never thank you enough. I shook his hand firmly, feeling the depth of connection and respect. You didn't need saving, you needed opportunity, and you created it for yourself. I just made sure you had a chance. This sentiment resonated throughout the crowd. Every story, every life was a testament to action over appearances, to dedication over judgment. And for the first time, I realized that the cheap car, the ridicule, the years of misunderstanding, they all led to this moment. Without them, perhaps the scale of impact wouldn't have been as profound. As evening fell, the community center glowed warmly in the soft light, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. Volunteers were leaving, children were reluctantly heading home, and families lingered, reluctant to let the day end. I stood at the entrance, watching the energy and joy radiating from everyone, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. My sister came to my side, her voice quiet but firm. Eleanor, I've learned more from you than I ever imagined. You've shown me that true strength isn't about cars, status, or appearances. It's about heart, persistence, and courage. I nodded, feeling tears prick at the edges of my eyes. I hope you carry that with you, not just here, but in everything you do. That's the real legacy. Later that night, as the last of the lights dimmed and the center fell silent, I sat alone in the quiet garage. The cheap car, once a symbol of ridicule, sat parked silently outside. I gazed at it for a moment, a small, ironic smile forming. It had been my shield, my cover, my reminder that appearances rarely tell the full story. And now it didn't matter. Ethan joined me, carrying 2 mugs of tea. It's done, he said simply. Everything we hoped for, it's real now. Real, yes, and enduring. That's what matters most. He nodded, glancing at the garage, the screens, the vehicles, and the quiet hum of purpose that still lingered in the air. You changed everything, Eleanor, not just for yourself, but for everyone here. The world sees it now. And it's only the beginning, I said, feeling the surge of possibility. There's so much more to do. The next morning brought a new sense of normalcy, yet it was different from any ordinary day. My family no longer judged, no longer mocked, and no longer doubted. My sister had become an advocate, my mother a mentor, and Ethan a strategist. We had all found our places within the larger mission. I walked through the community center one last time before heading to the office to review upcoming initiatives. Volunteers were busy, children laughed, and the energy of life and purpose filled every corner. It struck me then that the journey from ridicule to recognition, from misunderstanding to respect, was not just my story, it was a story of transformation for everyone willing to believe in action over appearances. Months passed, and the ripple effect of our work expanded. Other neighborhoods began implementing similar initiatives, inspired by the model we had created. Local governments reached out for advice, and national organizations invited me to speak about the power of quiet, purposeful work. Each step reinforced one fundamental truth. Impact is measured not by how you appear, but by the lives you touch. The cheap car remained, a relic of the past, parked quietly outside the garage. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of it and smile. It reminded me of the beginning, of the ridicule, of the assumptions made by those who could not see beyond surface appearances. But it also reminded me of resilience, of quiet perseverance, and the journey that led to lasting change. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I gathered my family in the garage. The air was warm with the glow of lamps and the faint hum of screens. My sister, Ethan, and my mother stood beside me, each a living testament to transformation and growth. "We've come a long way," my sister said softly, "from mockery to understanding, from doubt to belief." "Yes," I agreed, feeling the weight and significance of our journey. "And it's far from over. But today we can be proud of how far we've come, not because of recognition, but because of lives changed, hearts touched, and hope restored." We stood together in silence, letting the moment sink in. The cheap car outside, the garage behind us, and the world ahead of us, all symbols of a journey from judgment to understanding, from ridicule to respect, from isolation to connection. And in that quiet, powerful moment, I realized that the story was never about proving anyone wrong. It was about living with purpose, acting with integrity, and transforming not just my life, but the lives of countless others. The journey that began with ridicule had ended not in revenge, but in reconciliation, purpose, and legacy.